Okay, so let's get started with today's topic. Again, it's making $10 million in subcontracting within the federal market. And so let me expand a little bit on that topic and what I mean by that. You might be a new small business just starting out without any federal dollars. Well, the way I'm going to be talking about this topic, that $10 million might take you a little longer to get to. And so, you look at it smaller. You could be a large $1 billion firm and you're watching today's live session or this video replay, and you might be able to bring in that $10 million in a couple of months, right? So depending on where you're at, is how fast you can get that $10 million. But $10 million of subcontracting is a realistic approach. And so I'm going to talk to you about how or what I recommend you do in order to make that happen. So this is a right topic for you if you feel like you're not making enough money. That's why I wrote this. I work with companies trying to help them look at their long range plans. And I've done videos before. Gus might drop it into the chat here, but I've done videos talking about the 3 ways to make money are subcontracting smalls, priming with an agency, and subcontracting large. Those are basically the 3 ways to make money. And so today I'm going to focus on the subcontracting. One thing I will tell you is that I have a roadmap. I want to give you a subcontracting roadmap. And this lays out just steps you can follow towards achieving this goal of making $10 million in subcontracting. So throughout this video or at the end, put into the chat, please send me that subcontracting roadmap. And if you do that, I'll follow up with you and get it to you pretty quickly. But this roadmap's a great way for you to just have a single paper to follow along with some of the guidance I'm going to give you today. So let's talk about what subcontracting is. One of my favorite quotes out there is the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it took place at all. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it took place at all. And the reason I put that, I love that quote, is because often you go into meetings and you think you're on the same page and you're not. And so I want to do that with us today. Is just stop for a second and go, what is subcontracting? We might think we all are on the same page, but clarifying it makes it, for sure that we're on the same page. So the first thing from a subcontracting standpoint, from my standpoint, right, you can subcontract under a small business and you can subcontract under a large. But either way, what it basically means is they've got the prime contract and you're just on their team. If you're new to the subcontracting world and the GovCon world, somebody else can dive much deeper into that for you. Go to your PTAC. I'm always telling you, go to your PTACs. But there's 2 ways you can go at subcontracting. First is the size, a small business subcontracting approach where you're going after them as a prime, or they're the prime, and a large business, right? Going after them. The other is when you think about subcontracting, you can subcontract on new opportunities. Hey, company A, I want to be part of your team. And now you're getting on their team. Until you guys win it, you're never a subcontractor, right? You're a teammate. But as soon as you win it, you'll be given a subcontract based basically on your team agreement. And so now you're a subcontractor. But that's on new opportunities. And from my perspective, that represents revenue that's 6 to 24 months out. You can do new or you can do awarded contracts. And so awarded contracts are contracts that were awarded yesterday, not tomorrow. And those contracts, there might be positions in there that you can go in and help support. And so some prime contractor would welcome you in if you're bringing in what they need, and you can get, and that could represent revenue in the next few weeks, few months, where it's starting to get going because the contract's already awarded. And let me pause for a second to talk about a myth around by the way, really quick pause. If you see me looking this way, I'm looking at the chat and my clock because I want to respect your time. 12:30, I want to be done and off. And I'm looking at the clock. But there's a myth about awarded contracts. A lot of us might think that once a contract's awarded, that team is already done. It was formed when they chased the opportunity, and then they landed it, and they've got their people in place, and you're not going to get any part of that contract. Well, that's just not really the case, because often what happens is a contract is won, but for whatever reason, the prime is struggling to get all the work covered down on. And because I think in FTEs or putting a person on the job, it really comes down to hiring enough people or the right people to fill it out. And so there's a lot of positions that they haven't filled yet, that if you come in and you bring your area of expertise matching up to their need, then you have the ability to get on a contract that was awarded and already has other teammates. They're not pushing other teammates out. What they're saying is, turns out we have room for more subcontractors to help us fulfill the government's need. And so that's why, whenever I'm talking about revenue, I'm always talking about going after new opportunities and currently awarded contracts. Thanks, Matt. So occasionally I'll look at the chats. If I don't see your chat, it's just because I'm not good at reading chats. All right, so that's what subcontracting is, right? You can contract with a small and a large, and you can do it on new opportunities, future or existing contracts, the ones that are already awarded. When you think about what you're doing, I want to introduce you to this whole concept in sales, just called the numbers game, right? The more you do, the more likely you'll have success. And so if you want to get, if you're calling up a customer to get a meeting, or if you're calling up anybody to get a meeting, you might not be able to call one person to get a meeting, but guaranteed, when you call enough people, you will get enough meetings. And so that's all a numbers game is how much of an activity do you have to do before you get the results you're looking for? Never think that you'll get 100% of the people coming to you and saying, oh, I'll talk to you, or 100% of the contracts awarded to you, right? That's unrealistic. But there is some number in there. And I'm going to relate that back to subcontracting in a second. But the reason I say this is because when I help companies with 5-year strategies in the federal space, where they're looking at their money, I describe exactly what I described in that previous video on where you get money: small businesses, federal agency priming, or large subcontracting. And so when I create a 5-year strategy with somebody, we're looking in there going, how are we getting that money? How's it coming out? And what I'm recommending to you is you have to figure out where you're at and modify my advice a little bit to fit to you. But certainly this can fit for everybody at any level, even the beginning, is identify 10 teaming partners, 10 possible strategic partners that you can begin to pursue. And I want to point out what a strategic partner is. To me, that means somebody who you could work with to get on 4 opportunities a year. So if there's a company out there and you like them, but they're probably only going to invite you into 1 or 2 opportunities, then they're not a strategic partner to me. They're a good partner. They're an ad hoc partner, somebody that, depending on the need, it arises, you work with them. But a strategic partner or a strategic agency is big enough to handle the goals that you have. And your goal should be 4 opportunities, 1 opportunity a quarter, that you could subcontract under them. So if you went with, let's say, Booz Allen, they're $1 billion firm. You easily could be doing 4 a month, let alone 4 a year with them. If you team up with me on my last company, you could probably find 4 opportunities, because we went after enough that if you brought a complimentary service, we'd probably be bringing you in left and right to the proposals we went after. And so what I recommend to people is find 10 teaming partners out there that you can begin to build a solid relationship with. Obviously, you go through this process of finding and developing relationships with each of these people. There's a whole set of how that you do that. In fact, my webinar on April 5th talks about that. But when I talk about 10 partners, I'm looking for 10 teaming partners, small businesses, et cetera, that can give you 4 opportunities that you can participate as a sub on. If they're a good partner and they're experienced and they're going after agency work that they could win, then you have 4 opportunities for each one of them. That represents 40 proposals a year just from subcontracting, right? If you're $1 billion firm, I'm going to tell you to like quadruple that or 10x that. But this ability to find these folks and almost have them selling for you, because they're out there identifying the customer and they're pushing in. And what you're doing is bringing your expertise. If you're new to federal government, that's perfect, because that's all you want to do is play at that level. If you're very experienced in federal government, well, this allows you to expand your reach. You have your own prime contracts you're trying to win. You might invite these teaming partners in as a sub, but now they're going after their own targets where you have a place in there, a 2% share, a 10% share, a 50% share. If you line up those partners correctly, then you'll find the ones that fit for you. So I want to put it in a numbers game, an example. And I use this company. A friend of mine, Greg, is out and he's been part of the HubZone Chamber, and before we renamed it the GovCon Chamber for years. And so I know him through and through. Plus, his company does what my last company does. But Greg's out in San Diego, and he does SharePoint. And so just using him as a numbers game, when I say 10 million, if I was to talk to Greg, I'd say, let's say your average rate is $100 an hour. $100 an hour times a normal FTE would basically be $200,000 a year. If you don't know this math, I use simple math where I say you double the hourly rate and you get the annual revenue, right? So $100 an hour, $200,000 a year, 5 FTEs at $200,000 a year makes $1 million. So you need 50 people at $100 an hour rate to make that $10 million subcontracting that I talked about. Now, I didn't say you can make it all in a month or in a year. So if you spread it across 5 years, that's only $2 million a year. That is very achievable. Remember, if you're new, cut your teeth, get experience with this. But if you're doing 5 million plus, you should be able to put in a plan like that where you're increasing by $2 million a year, to land $10 million in revenue. And if you're, let's say, $10, $20 million up, you should easily be able to pull that $10 million goal into 1 year, right? So make a realistic goal, but it's not that complicated to look at the math to understand what does it take to get to where you want to go. And so I just call it a numbers game, because when I do sales, I want to know the activity I have to do. How many companies will I need to reach out to in order to find the 10 that work? And so let me just stick with Greg as an example here. His company is SharePoint. If you don't know Microsoft SharePoint, it's basically a communication collaboration tool, an application development platform that Microsoft has. And so it's an IT tool. What I would recommend to Greg is, why don't you look at the 8A Stars 3 contract vehicle? The 8A Stars 3 contract vehicle is a $50 billion contract vehicle over the next, well, it's an 8-year thing, so it's got like 7 more years, but it's a $50 billion contract vehicle that has about 1,000 companies that are on there. That means all of these companies in one way or another are doing something related to IT services. They had to prove themselves. Some of those companies make very low revenue, less than, I think some of them are making less than a couple of million, right? And some of them are making north of 20, 30, 40 million. And so what Greg needs to do is to vet those companies for 2 things. One is, which ones of them are big enough that they have the ability to go after prime contracts on this contract vehicle over the next 5 years, 7 years. Which ones are like that, and which ones are closest to what Greg does, but not overlapping. So an example is, let's say he reaches out to a company that does software development, but they don't do SharePoint software development. It's a unique thing. And so he can get in there and team up with them. Well, out of 1,000 companies that are on this vehicle, finding 10 that fit is not hard. It's time consuming. It might take you time to make the calls or do a little bit of research to find the right ones. But to put it in perspective, I just helped somebody reach out to 2 days ago, I think it was 30 companies or something. And from those 30, they found 12 that were exactly what they were looking for. Now, this related to 12, a specific single opportunity, but it's the same approach. When you work to create a list to reach out to, and then you reach out to them, you're just starting and building relationships. These people would love to connect with you, and they would especially love to work with you if there's a complementary set of services between you and them. So, by the way, I see all those comments about please send the roadmap. I absolutely will. So coming back, though, I would recommend that Greg does that, and he can find 10 firms that are on this contract vehicle. And the upside for that contract vehicle is most of those task orders are direct award, meaning many of these firms have close relationships with their existing customers. If they don't already do SharePoint, but Greg builds a relationship with them and they see him as the SharePoint arm, they still get 51% of the work, but now he's beginning to get in there and develop contracting opportunities, develop the revenue, obviously, and then all the bonuses of understanding the customer, getting experience with the customer, et cetera. So let me bring it back down to this last tip that Greg needs, and it's for you guys, right? It's for you specifically, is in order to do all this, you need to focus, right? You need to focus on 2 things. One is the agency that you want to go after. So, if you try to go after everybody, you can't really learn. Also, when you focus on a single agency, let's say that 8A Stars 3 group of companies I talked about, you could then look and say, well, show me the 8A Stars 3 contract holders who are working in the Air Force. Now you've whittled that list down to the people who are in here, and you're reaching out to businesses that are already in your target customer. So focus on the agency. The next thing is, the second thing is focus on your core competency, not core competencies. You want to be known for one thing. As a small business under 50 million, you want to be the best at one thing, right? I guess at 50 million, you can have a couple of things, but really one thing, right? And so for Greg's company, although he does all this other related activity to SharePoint, he wants to be known as SharePoint because people put it in their head. And to put it in perspective, right? I've known him for several years through the chamber, our professional friendship and relationship here. But wherever I go, I know Greg Bay and Group out in San Diego does SharePoint. They're your SharePoint folks. I ran into a $100 million opportunity with another customer, and they were struggling with that particular area. I'm like, well, have you talked to Greg? And I just put the two of them together. And, Greg's teaming up with them on a particular opportunity because he was able to drive into my head. This is the one thing we're great at. And when he gets in, he can expand, right? That's the thing. We fear, oh, we'll miss out on something. No, you'll actually get more opportunities when you tell whoever you're trying to talk to, hey, this is our core competency, the primary thing we're good at. So focus on that core competency. And then it's the same thing when he reaches out. Let's use that example as 8A Stars 3. When you reach out to them, you'll be able to communicate pretty quickly. This is what we do. And in their mind, they'll be able to see, is it a fit or not a fit? And you'd be amazed how fast we can hear from you and you go, this is my expertise. I go, yeah, that's not a fit for us, which is totally fine. Or we go, oh yeah, we don't do that stuff. Or we do that stuff, right? Whatever that is, the more clear and concise your message and your focus is on what you do, the easier it is for others to help you. So coming back, just bringing this back a little bit full circle before I move into the last thing I want to talk about is, when you want to make $10 million in subcontracting, it begins with the first 100,000, right? And it works it up. So depending on where you're at, you'll be able to scale up faster. But when you want to go after $10 million in subcontracting, begin with having a strong focus on the agency you want to go after and the core competency you have, which will make it easier for you to identify the right people to begin to build a new relationship with. It'll make it easier for you to communicate out there what you do in a way that people will resonate with. So the first thing is having that strong focus. The second thing is identify the companies you want to reach out to and begin to approach. So like I said, with the 8A Stars 3, I would just go in there. If I went to, if I wanted to get on Oasis, or if I wanted to look in Seaport Next Gen, you can go in and find the contract holders and begin to pull it down tight. And so this is a good thing. And then you can reach, so now you've got the people you want to call, and then you just reach out to them. And if you haven't done this a lot, you'd be amazed at how straightforward it is once you know the process and you begin to follow the process, right? If I say it's easy, but you don't know the process, well, it's not easy, it's complicated. But the minute you know the process and you begin to see it, that's kind of the purpose of the roadmap. The minute you see that, the minute you'll begin to feel that it's easier than it was the day before. And so have a core competency focus, an agency focus, pick the people you want to reach out to them with a pretty straightforward outreach program. You can do it through email. Don't spam them, right? You want to reach out to individual companies specifically, not a group of them. But reach out to them and have that intro call. And that intro call is really 15 minutes max for an intro call. You can still schedule it for 30, but you should be able to communicate in the first 5 or 10 minutes what you do and ask, is there a fit? Should we keep talking? And so you do that. And after that, it's just a matter of having a regular scheduled meeting. So when I talk about 10 partners, and this might be the last tip I provide just as I watch the time wrap up. When I talk about 10 partners, sometimes people might think it's overwhelming to manage those relationships, et cetera. Well, if you keep it, if you follow a process, right? Government contracting is not a secret. It's all just a process. You can set up a meeting every 2 weeks where you're coming in, hey, let's have a 15-minute, 30-minute max touch base where we talk about the pipeline, the opportunities we might work together. When you're much smaller, you probably won't have any opportunities to say, hey, we're going to prime this. You'll just be subbing. That's fine. Just communicate that. And when you're larger, let's say you're 10 million or above, then you should be bringing a couple opportunities that you are priming and might be inviting them on. And certainly you're looking for them to have 4 opportunities that you can begin to look at. But you have this regular meeting. It's only 15 to 30 minutes. 30 minutes is 5 hours total every 2 weeks to maintain a relationship with these 10 folks. If you add in some preparation time and some after action time to write the action items, et cetera, you double the time. You're 10 hours to manage 10 people every 2 weeks. That shouldn't be hard if you're trying to grow 10 million. So, again, that goes back to the numbers game, thinking about it. So, and from that point forward, it's all just relationships. And I'm not diving into that today. Do you have questions I can answer, throw them in the chat. If I was clear, if you found this valuable, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that as well. The last thing I want to say, and then I'm going to look to the chat, is again, if you'd like to get a copy, and if you haven't done it already, of the subcontracting roadmap, go ahead and put a comment in the comments that says, please send me the subcontracting roadmap. That way I don't forget. And this is really important as well for those of you who are watching the replay. I understand not everybody can make it to the live every day. And I appreciate those of you that do, but I understand those of you who aren't. So if you're watching the replay on LinkedIn, YouTube, or listening to it on a podcast, just put that note in the comments and I'll get back. Yeah, Vanessa, I'm huge on numbers. I like reverse engineering. How many calls do I have to make in order to get this, in order to get this? So, okay. So I'm just looking through these comments really quick. It's good to see a lot of people, a lot of faces and names I recognize. Seeing if there's questions. Just dragging. Sorry for pausing here. Quiet. I should have some sort of music. Looking at a lot of please send. I don't see a question yet. Thanks, by the way, for putting your core competency and company name in. That's really good. Okay, 3 ways. Oh, there's Gus. Shri. I don't think I'm missing questions at the top. There you go. Okay, and then something at the bottom. Thanks, Curtis. All solid stuff. Absolutely, Deborah. We'll send it. And thank you. I appreciate that as well. I think we're good to go. I don't need to keep it going. I did want to share a couple of last minute things. And if you have a comment, I'll look over in one last second. But next week's sessions, I'm going to try to make them all around capture. There's these 5 topics within capture that I like when I'm doing capture and helping a customer go after an opportunity. And I tend to help in that $100 million up range. When I'm going after it, there's certain things I go after that I'd like to share with you next week. So next week, you're going to see 5 topics around capture that are just building on each other. And they're what I do when I'm doing capture myself, if I was supporting somebody. Or actually, I didn't do it as much in my previous company. It's all this stuff. I'm like, oh, if I had just known in my last company. So that's part of the reason I try to share what I know with you, so that you don't have to spend the years I spent learning stuff, especially learning the how, right? People would tell me what to do, but not so much how. And so next week, it's going to be how I do 5 different steps in capture. So I hope you're able to attend, and you'll see me put them out probably on Sunday. If you're in the chamber, govconchamber.com, and you've signed up, you'll get an email where I list out the next topics our team plans to do. And then April 5th, we're doing a webinar. I'll be talking about finding and building relationships. Everything in government contracting is about relationships. Of course, there's all these other things, but having the relationships leads to all sorts of activity. And by the way, in case I misspoke yesterday, relationships and cold calling are vital to capture. So just a shout out to Lara on that. And the last thing I want to tell you is that government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Keep joining me on these daily lives and I'll share the process. Have a great day.